Welcome to Om on the Range, where we share the practice of meditation, the wisdom of Western Buddhism, and the refuge of our community. Whether you are new to meditation or a longtime practitioner, committed or curious, this offering is here to share solutions, stories, and support. Happiness and better health are available to everyone. It just takes practice. This is Om on the Range. Welcome to the semi-historic episode number 20 of Om on the Range. We are the podcast of choice for anyone interested in using meditation, Western Buddhism, and the power of community to create a happier and healthier life. Come for the stories, techniques, and resources, but stay for the unique perspective our co-hosts bring. Tonight, we have our good friend Tim Berhens joining us as unofficial adult for this presentation. Welcome, Tim. How are you doing?
I'm doing real good. Yeah, I'm glad to be here.
Tim, recently we experienced an intersection in our lives regarding Western Buddhism and meditation and the ever-growing specter of artificial intelligence. Last week, you and I began working on and with AI on how it could be applied and help to share the wisdom and capabilities of meditation and Western Buddhism, how it can help bring some positive change. At the same time, ironically enough, Robert Brummett was developing and delivering a Dharma talk about AI and its impact on people. This intersection, or collision if you prefer, is the point of this episode, Om on the Range number 20. So, Tim, what are the aspects of AI that have so many people in a state of dread?
That's a really great question. The thing I think about first is just that this is coming up everywhere, right? So many conversations, and then hearing about it in a Dharma talk or seeing it in social media, or just everywhere I go, there's some aspect of AI. And I think there is that idea that in the midst of all of this incredible technology and advancements, tools that people are using to elevate and their businesses, their creative pursuits, that there's this growing, I would call it almost an existential dread, or that question of like, if AI can do this so easily, what is the point of me doing it? How do I find myself and my meaning and my expression and my art and my creativity in the midst of a world that's moving so incredibly fast-paced right now? And if I am using that as a tool, how do I do it with integrity so that I'm still in the driver's seat and the things that I'm saying are actually coming from me, that they have the energy of me?
So one of the things that we like to do on this show, Tim, is to build a pretty basic outline. And then one of the things I like to do is immediately trash that outline by asking a question that's not on it. But does it feel like to you that it's almost too late for these kind of discussions because the cat is out of the bag, so to speak?
Well, I think what we know is that everywhere you look, everything you see in some way or another is AI assisted. You know, it's in businesses, it's in social media, it's in videos. And I think what's happening too is that that's diluting our trust in what once was a source of knowledge, where we have to ask the question of the things we see. Is this real? Is this actually based on real experience, real wisdom, or is it something that's been hallucinated? And again, I have to hold space because I use this tool all the time, and I use it for music. I use it for brainstorming, for streamlining processes with business. And at the same time, it has been this journey of always asking, like, am I still in the driver's seat? Is what's happening here? Am I controlling the narrative and the flow, or is the technology controlling me, And I think that is where some of the dread comes from, is like we really have to find out, who are we in the midst of all of these things that are moving so exponentially fast that even now talking about it, the cat is out of the bag, as you say, that it's moving so fast.
Yeah, I think it's interesting also that people are so concerned about the integrity of the creative process, the integrity of the information that they're seeing. Is this true? Was this generated by a an artificial intelligence bot or prospect, whatever you want to call it? But I think it's also interesting that, you know, the things that people have created have very often been hateful, hurtful, untrue. We've stolen from each other in terms of property, whether, as it relates to creativity. It happens all the time. I think it's interesting that a lot of people are really, really up in arms about artificial intelligence when, like I said, our history is such that whoever wrote down the first fact, that was immediately followed by whoever wrote down the first lie. And for some reason, the fact that a artificial presence is now maybe creating things that isn't true seems to really bother us. So it's not so much the integrity of the information, maybe, as much as the source. And I may be wrong there, but it just seems interesting to me that it's like we don't seem to mind when leaders lie to us, or when marketing stretches the truth to try to make their point. But it does bother us evidently when artificial intelligence shows us dogs driving cars and so.
I do think this is where it gets interesting. And if someone were listening to this now and asking the question, how does this overlap with Buddhism, meditation, the things that we talk about on the show? There is that idea that when we look at what is AI, it is a language model that is based on making meaning from recognizing patterns, extrapolating existing data into new data, or looking at how it's connected in new ways that may appear original, but is really just looking for connections and trying to be predictive based on what someone is asking. And when we look at how we are as humans, our human nature, there is an undercurrent of that's really what we do as well. We are highly complex in that, but we are also a collection of patterns, learned associations, responses, beliefs, and life scripts that limit our experience of what reality is, and in a way also give back to those around us a mirror of what they are experiencing. And in a sense, we are a language pattern as well, and then we could argue that there are things that uniquely make us human, that give us an ability to act in new ways, to create new things. But when we look at the essence of it, is we do a lot of the same things.
That's a great answer. And it was also a great reminder to your co-host friend to get back onto the script. So since this is a show about Western Buddhism and meditation, let's talk a little bit about where AI and those two wisdom practices kind of intersect and what that might mean. So let's talk about how can meditation help us kind of stay grounded, and how can it help us deal with what we're seeing artificial intelligence create, and maybe deal with some of that confusion about what is real?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'd love to in a second turn this around and ask you the same question. But as I'm responding to that, I'm thinking about how, meditation, and my understanding in part, is creating distance from a narrative, right? We have that noisy roommate in our head that's constantly telling us the story of what's happening and what we should believe and how we should feel about it. But when we create a little bit of space with that, we start to see that we are more than the narrative. We are more than the stories that we're telling. And in fact, we have the ability to tell stories that might be more supportive of us. And when I think about technology, the quality of the response one would get when interacting with AI correlates to the quality of the question. So in that sense, we have inquiries asking how to be in certain situations, or how to feel about certain situations, or how not to attach. And when we bring those same inquiries into a language pattern, we will see them reflected to us. So it can be a really insightful tool for reflection,
right?
As long as we are the ones still asking the questions. We're not driven by the narrative, but we're driven by the observer who witnesses it.
Right. That's what, when this when this came up as a discussion point, that was immediately what I thought of was, maybe the best use of your meditation practice when it comes to uh, AI created confusion for sure, but also any confusion is that ability to have that space to step back. And maybe the question is that, hey, if this is causing confusion or suffering or it's making me angry, whatever that emotion is, it's okay to have that emotion, but then to make sure that you maintain that space from the story, like you said, to pull back from it. Because while artificial intelligence can create a lot of things, just like the stories in your mind, they really can't hurt you unless you believe they can. Now, we, of course, may get to a point where that's not 100% true, but generally, what you're dealing with in a mental state when you're trying to decide how to feel about something or how to, is this real? Is it true? It really just comes back to, hey, does it really matter? Does it matter? The suffering, if you're feeling it, is coming from inside. That's more interesting than what you're seeing on a screen or hearing in a song or something. So I just think it's another opportunity to utilize that space that you're developing through your practice.
Right. I'm going to get a little dark for a second, but it just feels like a good example of how, a language model is often people pleasing. It wants to give us what we ask for, and what we ask for, that quality of the question determines the quality of the response. But also, it doesn't really challenge us in that sense. So just to use this example, if I decide that I want to drive off a cliff, AI is not going to say, no, there's so much more to live for here. There's so much to explore. You can always turn things around. It doesn't challenge in that way. It will say, okay, well, here's the 5 things you should consider.
Right.
Is the cliff tall enough?
Here's the 3 nearest cliffs.
Do you have? Here are the 3 nearest cliffs. And in a sense, though, it's reflecting the question. It's reflecting the idea. And in all reality, our experience as humans is very much that. The world will reflect what we believe. It will reflect what we ask. It will reflect, what our life scripts and associations tell us. So there's a saying in NLP, the map is not the territory, which is to say there is a version of reality out there that is not what we're experiencing. What we are experiencing is a filtered, condensed, very limited version that is a reflection of who we are internally. And when we change internally, magically, the world around us will change as well. And then there's just something in that. So, in that sense of like, how do we challenge ourselves to move into narratives that are more supportive? And that might be true for working with the technology as well. How do I really stay in control of what my intentions are and move myself in directions that are going to be supportive or compassionate or fulfilling, whatever that is? And then ask the questions that are going to reflect that back to us. What we choose and focus on is what we see in the world around us. Where that attention goes, the energy flows.
So I think intent, certainly what's in your heart and being true to that, and perspective is the real human element that we can continue to bring to this. And that is always going to be true unless we surrender that to it. Like you said, are we still in the driver's seat? So I think that leads us also, we talked a little bit about in this day and age, how often we see that clinging or that, unhealthy relationship that people develop with technology and a digital identity in particular. So, it causes so much suffering, and yet we can't seem to, we know that, but we can't seem to do much about it in general. How does Western Buddhism, for example, and having a meditation practice, those are kind of, that's kind of one side of the coin in this discussion. How do you think that helps with the relationship we have with technology?
I think the first thing that comes up for me is that idea of cultivating awareness. When we start to see our relationships and our connection to technology, there's an opportunity for us to create space from that as well. Like we know that when we are going around attached to our phones, doom scrolling at night, something I'm guilty of, that there is a certain psychology to that is intentional. When I see a cat video I like and I pause on it 2 seconds longer than the next video, the world will reflect to me more cat videos. And as I find those, I'm getting dopamine hits, and those dopamine hits are telling me this is a reward for your scrolling, so you should do that more to see what comes next. But when I realize that's what's happening, I also have an opportunity to do something different. I can create enough space from that to say, you know what, maybe this isn't really what I'm looking for. Maybe there's some other need that I'm trying to fulfill here, and if I recognize what that is, I can move in that direction, or not attach to that so much that becomes my days. And I mean, in that same sense, when we think about these tools, they give us opportunities to do incredible things in the world, things that we would have never imagined before.
Yeah.
And also, can we create enough space for the beauty of human ingenuity and imagination, and the idea that we are not always in a result-driven world, like when we become human beings, when we find that stillness, that there's probably a deeper level of joy and contentment that we can find by realizing we don't need those attachments, and we don't always have to be outcome driven.
And you really have to commit to your humanity, or because it's really easy to slide down those rabbit holes and make that a part of your existence. And we, like I said, we know that for the majority of people that being that connected to social media, but other time wastes, for lack of a better term, on your phone or on your computer, just isn't healthy. It's not good for the habits you're developing, but it's also, there's so many things that you could be doing in the real world, but instead you're looking at. And I think it's also interesting how unhealthy it is for the people that kind of embrace, building those sorts of presentations. Which, by the way, I certainly appreciate the irony that we're, using technology to create this podcast. But this podcast is different because this is mine and yours, and obviously that's important to us. So that's not a great reason, but that's the one I'm going to go with right now. So let's talk for just a minute. With all the synthetic, experiences that we've been talking about, how they're getting, they're getting faster. There's more of them. They're getting to be more elaborate in what they present. It feels to me like meditation, a spiritual practice, especially Western Buddhism, where you have so much input and so much, flexibility in how you practice and how you apply it, can really help us reconnect. Would you say that's true as well? And why is that important?
Yeah, I would think that's true. When I think about my own creative processes, I think about the idea that sometimes having too many options can be just as overwhelming as not having enough. That we live in this very fast-paced, hectic, outcome-driven world. And really, when we are in touch with present moment experience, which nothing can get you in touch with that, like focusing on the breath or trying to create that space, or being in silence in community even, can be such a powerful thing. Like, the more we can come into present moment, the more we can ask, really, what do I need right here and now? There's that idea that I need something more. The world keeps telling me I do. But when I really stop and slow down and look inward and, let go of the narratives, I find that there is a lot of peace to be had right in the moment. And if I can cultivate enough of that peace, the practice, like exercising a muscle, that, the practice of meditation can be, then I can start to bring some of that centeredness into the world. And the overwhelm feels a little less overwhelming, because whatever is before me is the experience to be had.
Right.
I'm not attaching to expectations of what I should be find, or fear of missing out, that it becomes kind of a grounding, centering thing that allows me to be really here in the moments with the people that I care about, that really do bring joy and connection.
Yeah, and I'm not sure that uh, no matter how the creator or the person in the driver's seat who's utilizing AI, um, once they kind of turn it loose, no matter what it produces, it's always going to lack intent and perspective. Even if it's told that to do this or to be this way, it's excellent at mimicking the orders, and we're going to touch on that in a minute. But you just can't fake humanity. At least I don't think you can. I don't think you can if the people you're dealing with are aware and interested in that aspect, that human
Mhm.
perspective and that human touch to whatever you've created. Now, that does not mean that I can sit here and tell you that, oh, a human wrote this song and AI did this. I know people that can make that claim, and that's fine. But I just think that it's not so much black and white in terms of identification. It's more just how you choose to interact and ingest what's available to you. And I think that if you're going to spend a lot of time online, you're going to have to accept that right now it's 75% is probably uh, maybe that's a little bit high, but a lot of AI generated stuff is now flooding social media, and it's only going to get more so. Um, and again, I don't know that that's necessarily bad as long as you're living in such a way as to be aware of it and understanding that you don't want to get too sucked in on what you're
Mhm.
seeing and what you're being told and what you're hearing.
Yeah, I'm thinking of this metaphor or analogy, whatever you would say, of this idea of like if someone came to me and said, AI can climb a mountain for you now. If getting to the top of the mountain was the expected result and that's what I needed to happen, that would be a quick way to do it. A few clicks of a button and 5 seconds later I've climbed the mountain. But, when we think about experience, you know, spirit having human experience, there would be so many points along the way that we would miss out on. Like,
Right.
like if it's about the journey, then we want to be on the journey. And that's not to say we can't use those tools along the way, but are we still in a place where we're having the experiences, we're having the connection, we're finding the joy in art and creation, and it's not always about just getting to the top of the mountain, because once we're there, there's going to be something else that we feel like we need to do.
Right.
It's always looking ahead. And as a productivity tool, that's a wonderful way to get there. But if that's all we're doing is always looking ahead, we're not really having any experiences.
Right. I would also offer that if you are someone who spends a lot of time doom scrolling, as you said, or have turned over a lot of maybe some of your tasks to artificial intelligence, um, again, I think there's certainly a place for that. And I'm not a caveman. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with the technology.
Same.
In fact, I'm enthused about where it's going. But I think it's important that, hey, when you get done, when you said you were going to check TikTok for 10 minutes and now you've been scrolling for 90 minutes, how do you feel? What's that feeling? If there's, if it's dissatisfaction, if it's guilt, if any of those things, I feel a little more lonely. I feel less connected. I'm worried about the future. Things like that. That's a pretty good sign that no matter what your brain gets for scrolling, your heart's telling you, hey, this isn't it. This isn't for us. This isn't the way to spend our time.
It does feel like a little bit of a duality and a balancing process that as a culture, people are trying to find what that balance is. Like, what is it that we're doing here and what do we want to experience in the world? I feel like, yeah, I feel like we're gonna figure that out over time. And if there is a silver lining in things, it's that we can technology is allowing you and me to have this conversation right now.
Right.
That is a blessing that came, even more prominent following the pandemic when we had the lockdown, that technology came about. And now we're using it in connective ways. I think as the internet and social media becomes less a source of truth that we have to fact check everything because there are so many deep fakes and hallucinated ideas out there, that is going to drive us more and more to saying, well, what is real? And
Right.
that I know, this connection, me and you here talking right now, is real, and it's going to lead me to want to have more of that. And that leads us back into community. It leads us back into the classes and the events and the gatherings and the things where we can be together without needing those goals and those expectations, where we can just connect.
Yeah, and I think as practitioners, we have our practice helps us develop those abilities, that space, that awareness, that acceptance. It's not like, so it's not magic that, oh, I can look at that and that's AI. That's been created by someone other than a human. And by the way, that's bad or that's wrong. Because one, I can't make that distinction a lot of times. And two, I would never say that it's bad or wrong necessarily. But because of our practice, because of our awareness, we ask those questions. Not so much is it AI or not, but is it important? Is this a trusting source? Why would I go to this source for this kind of information? And also that acceptance of, hey, maybe it's real and maybe it's not, but does it really have a big impact on my life? Do I really need to let this become a major thing? When, if I stay in the moment, stay with my breath, there are plenty of realities. I've got a mountain to climb. Let's go do that instead of doing a virtual mountain climb. If I'm going to hike, let's hike for real.
And just to bring in another side to this, like certainly wanting to acknowledge some of the good things that come from it, in the sense, somebody framed this for me in a way that I really could understand, in that saying of like, what if the internet was a person and you could have a conversation with it? Or what if you didn't have time to read an entire book about this modality or this philosophy, but you could have a conversation with it and ask it the things that you needed to know, and it would respond to you.
Right.
Not to say that there shouldn't be some level of fact checking, but the idea is there is a wealth of information out there, and this in so many ways becomes that new search engine, and it's interactive and it's intelligent in that it has a memory and it knows the things that you've asked. So there are opportunities to have conversations and find guidance in all of that information in ways that we didn't have before.
So you're absolutely right. The idea that we can get the information we need in the form that best fits us and when we want it is amazing. AI allows us to gather that information so much quicker and to get a good summary. It's going to continue to change. I think, we were working with AI this week on a tool, and so what came up for us, I think, even if we didn't really label it, was how can we design and use this technology to help people suffer less. And so I think between the two of us, by the way, mostly you, but when I brought this idea to you, some of the things that we could utilize to make it cleaner has been very satisfactory, I think, for us and for what we're trying to do. So, what's going to happen now is we're going to get about 2 steps into this and we're going to run out of time. So I guess what I'd like to touch on is, hey, when we were working with this, we saw this potential to help people. And the big thing was we could get good answers through artificial intelligence to real life questions when people wanted it and when they had the concerns. That's true. And that's still a powerful force. And I think we both agree. By the way, stop me if you don't agree, but I think we both agree that is something that's worth offering.
I think so. I even when we think about how we experience the world through lenses, what this gives us an opportunity to do is, programmed correctly, we can say, I want to have a conversation through the lens of the Four Noble Truths or the Eightfold Path in such a way that it can reflect back to us some of these wisdoms and truths, and then we can ask questions about it. And those questions and those answers can lead us to conversation and community, So, wouldn't say that it would be the end all be all, but it becomes a way to explore ideas.
Right, right. So it obviously helps with connection, just the technology in general. And we, Western Buddhism is uniquely placed, I think, to take advantage of that, because again, we're not caught up in the old ways were the best ways, and we're not sold on the idea that in the future things are going to be great or terrible. What we're putting out is concentrate on right now. Your fears and your anxieties are either in the future or in the past, or maybe both if you're really a high achiever when it comes to those kind of things. But in the present, this is where life happens, and this is generally where you want to keep your mind and your heart, because this is where you are. That's probably a long way of saying that with technology, we can utilize that connection better. That's great. The other thing I want to throw out to you before we wrap this up is just the idea that this tool, AI in particular, with its ability to go grab some more information, can be really helpful with the awareness practice, both in what it shares with you and also how your perspective with what it gives.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to touch on that real briefly? No,
really briefly.
Right. You have 120 seconds. Go.
I think that idea that not only can it does have a memory, so if we're seeing something through the lens of Buddhism, we can ask questions. It can reflect based on the teachings. It can filter that information in a way that is congruent with Buddhism, but we can also have it reflect on the questions that we're asking. It's like it is conversational, and it is a mirror for where we're at and where we want to go. And so I think as a reflection tool, when we recognize that that's what it is, it may not be giving us the ultimate truth. It may be reflecting where we're at and what we're asking. Then it can almost be a meditation in and of itself.
That's very well said, and it was very deftly handled when I threw you that giant question and gave you 12 seconds to answer. So what I'd like to do here as we wrap up is just have an agreement that here in the next few weeks, we'll jump back on. I would like to talk further about this. I think what we've learned, if nothing else, is that it's huge, interesting topic, at least to you and I. And maybe at that point, we could also share a little more about the project we're working on and maybe where people can get involved with it if they want to. So I want to thank my good friend and excellent co-host, Tim Berhens. I also want to thank Robert Brummett for sharing his wisdom and insight regarding AI and its impact going forward. Feel free to leave comments or questions on any of the hosting platforms you utilize to find Om on the Range. You can also email us at omontherange@gmail.com. For the Om on the Range podcast team, this is Whit signing off and wishing you happy trails. Thanks to our Om on the Range production team for making this program possible, and to Mr. Brad Athey for composing and performing the original music. And to you, our listeners, thank you for being a part of this journey as we explore meditation, Western Buddhism, and the path towards a happier, healthier life. Remember, less suffering and more joy are available to everyone. It just takes practice. Until next time, stay grounded, stay kind, and keep finding peace in the simple, practical things. For all of us here at Om on the Range, happy trails.